This Connect to the Capitol Extra. It is the gubernatorial race already underway in South Carolina. 5 declared Republicans are already in the race right now. And one of the questions that's coming up is, how did they start to distinguish themselves? Joining us today,
Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. It's wonderful to have you here. Now, on the main program, we talked a little bit about Quality Business Solutions, that organization that you founded that I believe was bringing in $1.5 billion. Is that right?
Yeah, that was our revenues when I left to become Lieutenant Governor.
That is absolutely incredible. And as you shared, this wasn't something that was handed down to you or passed down through the generations. This was something that you built yourself from the ground up to go from, a room in your house to a national organization, right? National level.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was, I always say God can dream a bigger dream for you than you can dream for yourself. and I truly believe that. When you start out, you have goals and you have dreams, and you try to make sure your goals and dreams kind of run parallel to each other. And I was very blessed.
Absolutely. Now, I'm sure it wasn't always easy running this organization, being responsible for such a team and everything. But can you give an example of maybe a tough business decision that you made as founder of Quality Business Solutions, and how that might translate into some policy that you faced as a lieutenant governor or that you might face as governor?
So I think a lot of it revolves around how are you going to run efficiently, how are you going to grow your business. I mean, I can remember in the early years, we were growing and growing, and you start to make tough decisions, right? Am I going to hire more people and just try to flood the floodgates with employees, or do I take a big, bold leap and invest in technology? And, you have to sit down and you got to crunch the numbers. And, I think that was a year that I might not have taken a salary and definitely didn't take any kind of year-end bonus, and invested close to $1 million in technology that would catapult me into the next level and make sure that my clients could have the efficiency they were looking for. I had to stay competitive. I think that's very relevant. As governor, you have to be more competitive than the states around you. You have to be more efficient. You have to bring a better product to market. And so that's what I did in the private sector. And those are tough decisions, right? When you're thinking about your own family and, weighing that out between your family and your business, and how do I tighten my belt and get everything running smoothly.
So let's dig deeper then into this efficiency question, because it is something that we've heard it from the DOJ standpoint at the national level. Technology is drastically changing the way business does business. AI, the influence of that, what's going to be happening is expected to be this exponential change.
Absolutely.
So how does that impact what happens in the growth of government? Can we look at, while trying to reduce income taxes and make us competitive, at least in the Southeast, if not nationwide, are there efficiencies that need to be put into place? Are there technologies that the state needs to be taking a look at and investing in for the future of this state?
Absolutely. When you look at hiring people, right, everybody wants to talk about bloated government. President Trump brought that to heart, right? When you utilize technology, let's face it, we have an aging workforce. Workforce is aging out. Why aren't we replacing that with technology? We have jobs looking for people every single day. And it gives you the ability to let your citizens, your clients per se, be able to work government when they can, when it's convenient for them, not trying to call on a phone and get a human being, right? There's a lot of things that we can do with technology, and that starts to bring down the cost of government. We saw that at the federal level. And when I talk about, bringing that kind of efficiency here, and we joked about it in the earlier segment, right, calling it SCOGE, let's make it kind of personal to South Carolina. That's what you're looking for, right? You're not going to see the tremendous money running to foreign nations. I don't want to scare people to think that, because here in South Carolina we have the largest rainy day fund that we've ever had, and we balance our budget every single year. But we can make cuts, we can tighten things up, but by running efficiently, it's amazing. President Trump said it really well in his first term when he talked about if you unleash the power of business, that's how you really start generating revenue as government. And we've seen that here. We've had surpluses every single year. that's how we've been able to cut the state income tax down.
Now, you certainly have a lot of commonality with President Trump. We've seen that. We've discussed that when it comes to the business background, the relative political newness, the freshness, the fresh eyes that you bring. And you describe yourself as a longtime Trump ally. You know, in your campaign video, you have quotes from Governor McMaster, from President Trump. And so I assume you would welcome a Trump endorsement, but it looks like that's probably a little ways off before we would get there. How might it impact your strategy if he were to endorse you, or if he were to endorse someone else? How would that impact how you would handle things?
You know, I would handle it the same way. I still think when you look at the experience that everybody has that they bring to the table, that's where you really see the big difference, right? You know, we talked about, like I said earlier, you know, I have had to balance a budget. I've had to sign the front of paychecks. I've had to worry about my employees every step of the way with every decision I've ever made in business. And you know, that is what sets me apart from the pack. The fact that I've done all these things. And I always say, look at your resume. We look at our resumes. If you were hiring somebody to be the CEO of your company, look at the resume of the candidates that are out there and who would you hire. And I think that goes a long way. It's just a common sense answer to a question that sometimes people ponder over. And when you phrase it that way, they're like, wow, I guess if I was hiring a CEO, you're the person I'd be hiring. And so that's the message I would continue to take to the voters, right? You want somebody that has the ability to do the job. And I come in on day one, working alongside the governor. It'll be 8 years at the end of our term. Having a feel, I've made relationships. I've been able to work with the General Assembly. It was interesting on day one. That was my first, you know, my position was relatively new in the way the lieutenant governor's position is framed now. And I sat at my desk, had just gotten sworn in the day before and thought, what do I do now, right? So I did what I did in business. I went out and started making relationships. I went upstairs to the House, started shaking hands and letting everybody I didn't know who I was, and understood what they were wanting in that session and what I wanted and where were our commonalities, and the same thing in the Senate. And then I began crisscrossing the state, sitting with business owners, finding out what we did good and what we needed to make changes on, and then came back and worked with the governor on it, and really worked with the General Assembly. Because being a statewide elected official, I was able to talk to everybody, where sometimes our House reps only understand what's going on in their district. And so that got to be, I think, a huge help to all of us to understand where people were thinking, what were South Carolinians thinking. Because even though we're a small state, I tell people all the time, very different thought processes when you're in the upstate, when you're in Charleston, or when you're in the Midlands. You know, the coast, they have different issues that they worry about than the upstate or the Midlands. And I said being a mom of three helped put me in place for this, because no matter where you are, everybody thinks you love the rest of the state more. It's just like your kids, whichever one you're talking to or maybe telling what to do, always thinks you love the other ones better, right? So it kind of put me right in place for this.
So this is a place that South Carolina, and one of the reasons why we have such a strong popularity as the first in the South in the presidential elections, is because we do have a cross-section of population. You have a more conservative upstate. You have a more progressive liberal on the coast. You've got a mix, and you've got massive growth happening in certain areas of the state. Horry County, one of the fastest growing areas in the state. A lot of people coming into South Carolina with our in-migration that has taken place. So as you start looking at, and we talked about this previously, when you start taking a look at you versus the other four candidates that are declared right now on the Republican side, it is now September. You've got to get to June. What is it that's going to be the difference maker that sets Pamela Evette apart from the other candidates that are out there as you're crisscrossing the state over the next several months?
Well, I think the choice is clear. You know, you can either pick a conservative businesswoman, mother of three, woman of faith, somebody who stood with President Trump when I didn't need to. I was with the president when he came down the golden escalator, right, that everybody talks about. I wasn't in public office. I just knew we needed a business person that could come in and shake things up and see things differently and really bring other businesses in. I have been I will be ready on day one to be governor. I've been sitting, like you said, just down the hall. But I've sat on the private sector, and I know what it is. I know what it is to make payroll. I know what it is to sign checks. I know what it is to work efficiently. I have the resume to do the job. And that is a strong contrast to the other people in this race who have never been on the business side, who have never started a business from scratch, but more so was not with President Trump, right? Today, if you look and talk to anybody, they are staunch Trump supporters. But I challenge everybody to go back to January of 23 when the president came here to the Capitol and he was looking for support. I was the only one out of all the candidates that stood by him when the world was looking to indict him and people were running away from him. I was loyal because I knew he was the right man for the job. And boy, hasn't he proved that right. 8 months in, the tremendous things he has done with federal government and what he's done to bring peace around the world. He was the man for the job. And I think when you look at all those things, and that separates me from the pack. And I think people want to know that you have the ability to do the job and that you're loyal. And being loyal means being loyal to the citizens of this state.
One thing that really strikes me is your relationship building. You were speaking about that just a moment ago when you shared that it was day one, you're there at your desk, you don't know, what next. Go upstairs, start connecting, start crisscrossing the state. So I would love to hear more about how you would work with people who maybe don't always align with you, people on the other side of the aisle who maybe have different ideas, different policy. Maybe on the Palmetto Pen, for example, if it's that issue, how would you either bring people over to your point of view and perhaps even listen and consider being influenced by theirs?
Well, first off, I think being lieutenant governor has been a great segue into that because I like to feel that I treat people with the same respect that they give me. And I've always had an open door policy in my office. Whether I agree with you or I don't agree with you, I owe you the courtesy by being your lieutenant governor for you to come in and tell me your idea. Now, that doesn't mean I have to agree with you, but I do have to give you the respect to listen to what you have to say, and that's exactly what I would do as governor. And the same thing, like Palmetto Penitentiary, right? They dubbed it Palmetto Pen. President Trump was looking for red states and conservative governors to say, hey, what do we do? How do you help me? The Biden administration, their dismal immigration policy has put, the entire country on its heels. And President Trump was elected on the fact that he was going to close our borders. He was going to deport dangerous illegal aliens out of this country. And he was going to need the help of everybody. And he won overwhelmingly. He won the electoral vote, he won the popular vote, he won every swing state. So this is a mandate given by the people to help him clean up the mess that the Biden administration and the Democrats left for us. And that's what that's doing, right? We need to help the president. We need to help Secretary Noem. And you see Republican governors, the governor himself saying that we're going to look around the state to see for an existing facility. The pushback was, who's going to pay for this? Well, the one big beautiful bill told us who was going to pay for it. The federal government was going to come in and pick up the price tag on this. They just needed the help of local, state government to find a place, find a facility, and help them.
So let's talk about the bills that come in. Mm-hmm. You have had a phenomenal first few months of fundraising.
Yeah.
$1 million within the first day or two.
Yeah.
And you have been one of the first to hit the airwaves.
Yes.
You hit a pretty hard-hitting ad that has come out this past week. Mm-hmm. Is that part of your strategy to start distinguishing yourself from the other candidates? What is your plan with that?
It's not really a plan. I just think, and I don't really think it was a hard ad. I think it was somebody's own words that were in the office that they're sitting in that are now trying to run away from them. And I think the people of South Carolina need to know, and you're going to have to explain why you said what you said. And that's why I think it's always been important for me to always make sure that I carried myself with dignity and grace. and I gave respect to everybody, and I took a hard line on things that were important to me. You know, Dave, you know firsthand, I mean, I testified in the Senate and the House for the heartbeat bill. I wasn't shy about it. You know, my kids might have gotten some flack around when they moved around the state, but that was okay. They're tough, and it's the way they felt too. And so I think you have to take what you believe in, and you have to be proud of it, and then you have to own it. And that's all that was about, is like, you can't today say that you are President Trump's biggest supporter in the state and that you've stood by him the entire time and then have that looming out there. It's not fair to the voters.
Let's go back to SCOJ. You've talked about the number of regulations you would eliminate for every new one, and talking about trying to reduce inefficiencies, all of these ideas that I think most people can get behind.
Yes.
But how exactly would you do that? How would you achieve that without losing some of the protections that we really do need, things like environmental protections or consumer protections?
Absolutely. Well, you know, my idea is that all of our regulations should be sunsetted and brought back up in front of the General Assembly if that's where they originated, so they could be looked at. Because we've seen over time that it seemed like a good idea when it was put into place. It might have seemed like a good idea 20 years ago, but it's not relevant anymore. And we've found that between the time something was written and we put it into practice, that we needed to tighten it up. Because I think what I hear from the people of South Carolina is they don't like when bureaucracy has too much gray area for interpretation, right? We want to make sure that, we just bring these things back up. If they're great, leave it into place. If they're not, and let's get buy-in. Let's get buy-in from the industries that they affect and see if they're actually helping or hurting.
Two more questions, and that
Sure.
This has been a great, longer conversation. And that's why we do Connect to the Capitol Extra, to give you more time than what we can do on just the airwaves themselves. When we start thinking about the relationship that exists between the governor, who is getting more power than previously, the growth of the cabinet, redrawing what needs to be done within state agencies, how do you see you being able to push forward an agenda, and what does that agenda look like in an Evette administration in January of 2027?
So, me being governor would be just kind of a legacy of what I've done as lieutenant governor, is making relationships, sitting down with the General Assembly, finding out what's important to them and what's important to me, and working together. The success of the governor and I is having the ability to work with the General Assembly, right? Sometimes very positively working together, and sometimes butting heads. But in business, people will tell you that's just a really good business meeting, when everybody walks away a little bit happy and everybody walks away a little bit sad and nobody gets it all, right? And that's what that would look like to me. It would look like working together to finally eliminate state income tax. Florida's done it, Tennessee, Texas. And if you go back to what I said about being a business person, those are our competitors, right? How do we do the same thing? How do we come up with a comprehensive tax plan to get that done? And then look at sunsetting those laws. A lot of talk already in the General Assembly about that. Making sure we have enough energy, right, to keep building and growing. Energy has to be affordable and reliable, and these are some of the next challenges that are coming up. The one thing I've been most proud of, I think, being lieutenant governor, the governor and I bringing the private sector in to help get ideas to fix problems. And that was something that pushed me into wanting to serve, is that no matter what state, and my business operated in 49 states, I can tell you it was everywhere. Nobody brought business to the table. Nobody said, hey, you solve these problems every day. What do you do? We did that. We did that when we were emerging from COVID. We did that when we started to worry about energy. And I'm going to continue doing that, bring the best and brightest to the table. And you can see President Trump has been wildly successful by harnessing kind of the knowledge out of the private sector, bringing it to government, and making it run better.
We've talked about investing in the state, investing in energy and corporations. And we've talked about how to pay for it. We've talked about SCOJ and other ways that we can bring in that revenue, even as we try to cut income tax. As you crisscross the state, what are you hearing from the voters about investing in the next generation, and what would your plans be there? How would we improve education in our state?
Well, I will probably die on this hill. I think we need full universal school choice. I think the money has to follow the child. I think parents have to be empowered to give their child the best educational outcomes for that individual child. As I said earlier, I have 3 children. They all learn very differently, all raised in the same house. Parents know their kids better than anybody else. We need to first and foremost get school choice across the finish line, really protect parental rights, right? Because we have seen over the years how that has been trying to erode away. I can tell you nobody loves your children more than you do, and definitely you don't want government doing that. We need to continue to invest in our technical colleges. Every company that has come here, near and far, looks at our technical college system as the way to get the workforce of the future. And when I sat with Lockheed Martin when they came here years ago looking to build the F-16 Block 70s up in Greenville, they said, Lieutenant Governor, how are we going to get the workforce we need? I didn't even have to think about it. It was like, it's going to be our amazing technical colleges.
Right.
And when I was there with them, when they turned the first planes over the generals of Bahram, they couldn't have shouted more, you were right. That technical college system is amazing, and we have the best in the world right here in South Carolina. So we need to invest in that. We need to invest in K through 12. We got to make sure our kids in 4K are learning all the things. The governor and I really looking at that 4K program. That's not a daycare program, right? And it's much cheaper to get those kids schooled up and ready in 4K than to try to play catch up when they're in high school. So we need to give these kids a solid foundation. School choice has made the biggest difference in every state looking for better educational outcomes.
Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette, thanks so much for taking the time. We would love to have you back, especially as you get further along in the campaign, and really kind of hear more about what you're hearing, what you're seeing all across the state as you're campaigning. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'd love to be back.
Fantastic.
And thanks so much for watching as we keep you connected to the Capitol.